Welcome back to EtherLink AI Insights. I'm Alex, and today we're diving into a topic that's becoming increasingly urgent for enterprises across Europe: AI governance and compliance as we approach a major regulatory deadline. We're specifically looking at Helsinki's approach to what's being called a trust-first enterprise compliance model. Sam, thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Alex. This is a fascinating moment because we're not just talking about another regulatory compliance checklist. The EU AI Act's August 2026 implementation is forcing organizations to fundamentally rethink how they build and deploy AI systems. And Helsinki, honestly, is becoming a real model for how to do this right.
So let's set the scene a bit. Why is 2026 such a critical inflection point? What makes this different from, say, GDPR compliance that we've already been dealing with for years?
That's the key distinction. GDPR was fundamentally about data, how you collect it, store it, protect it. The EU AI Act is about decision-making systems themselves. It's not asking what data are you using, but rather, how is your AI actually making decisions, and can you prove those decisions are fair and explainable? That's a completely different architectural challenge.
So organizations can't just bolt compliance on top of existing systems like they might have done with GDPR?
Exactly. And here's where it gets sobering. McKinsey's research shows that 62% of enterprises attempting AI Act compliance discovered their governance frameworks were inadequate within 90 days. They thought they were ready, then hit reality. The problem is that traditional governance treats compliance as a legal checkbox. The AI Act demands operational integration.
Operational integration. That's a really important phrase. What does that actually look like in practice?
It means governance has to be embedded into your deployment pipelines, not added after the fact. You need continuous monitoring, decision impact measurement, and audit trails that track every decision back to training data and model version. For Helsinki's financial services sector, this is especially complex because they're operating under both ECB supervision and EU AI Act requirements simultaneously.
That dual regulatory regime sounds like a nightmare. Is that where this trust-first governance framework comes in?
Yes. Trust First flips the script entirely. Instead of building compliance mechanisms after you've deployed a system, you're architecting trust from inception. That means explainability by design, audit-ready infrastructure, real-time impact measurement, and graduated human-in-the-loop controls. You're designing the system to be trustworthy, not just compliant.
I like that framing. Trustworthy versus compliant. But here's my question. Isn't that more work up front? Why would organizations choose that path if they're already under time pressure to meet 2026?
It actually saves work long-term, but I understand the perception. Think about it this way. If you're doing reactive compliance, you're retrofitting systems. You discover gaps, you patch them, you document them. Organizations that do that now will face massive recertification crises in 2027 when regulators actually start enforcing. The ones building Trust First will sail through because their systems are already operating transparently.
Okay, so that's the governance side. But I know there's another major shift happening, from chatbots to autonomous agents. Can you break down why that matters for this conversation?
This is huge. A chatbot answers questions. An autonomous agent executes business decisions. In a financial services context, a chatbot might explain loan eligibility criteria to a customer. An agent would autonomously approve applications within defined parameters. That's fundamentally different in terms of risk and governance requirements.
So the higher the autonomy, the tighter the governance requirements.
Precisely. The EU AI Act actually restricts fully autonomous decisions in high-stakes domains. Article 22 explicitly addresses this. So organizations wanting to deploy autonomous agents in financial or legal services need sophisticated risk classification, graduated autonomy frameworks, and continuous monitoring. You can't just let an agent loose and hope for the best.
What does graduated autonomy actually mean?
It means you're designing systems with different levels of human involvement depending on the risk. Maybe routine transactions get full autonomy. Medium-risk decisions get human review after the fact. High-risk decisions require pre-approval, and you're adjusting those levels continuously based on system performance data. That's where your audit trails become essential. You're proving to regulators that your autonomy levels are appropriate.
This sounds like it requires pretty sophisticated infrastructure. What are the actual technical components organizations need?
You need comprehensive audit trails that capture decisions at every stage: training data, model version, input parameters, the decision itself, and outcomes. You need explainability mechanisms built into the models so you can articulate why specific decisions were made. You need real-time monitoring dashboards tracking fairness metrics, accuracy, and operational performance. And you need version control for everything: models, data, algorithms, configuration changes.
That's a lot to manage. Are we talking about custom-built systems? Or are there frameworks emerging to help with this?
There are emerging frameworks, but honestly, a lot of this still requires thoughtful architectural work. Helsinki's strength is that they have strong technical communities and a collaborative regulatory environment. They're not waiting for perfect tools. They're building governance-first architectures and treating compliance as integral to design rather than an afterthought. That's the mindset shift.
So if I'm a financial services company in Helsinki reading this, what's my first move? What should I prioritize?
First, audit where you are. Document your current AI systems, classify them by risk level according to EU AI Act criteria, and assess your audit trail capabilities honestly. Second, if you have anything approaching autonomous decision-making, immediately map out where humans need to stay in the loop. Third, start building governance into your development pipelines now, not after you've built the system. Fourth, establish relationships with your regulators early. Transparency builds trust.
And if they're further behind, if they haven't really started thinking about this yet?
Then they need to move quickly but thoughtfully. The clock is ticking toward August 2026, but rushing reactive compliance is worse than no compliance. Better to acknowledge the gap, build a realistic timeline, and move decisively. Organizations that are transparent with regulators about their implementation plans tend to get more flexibility than those trying to hide deficiencies.
Final thought. Why is Helsinki specifically positioned to lead on this? What's different about their approach?
Finland has a strong track record with forward-looking regulation. They led on GDPR implementation. They have thriving fintech and legal tech communities that understand both technology and regulatory requirements. And culturally, there's an emphasis on transparency and trust rather than minimum viable compliance. That mindset is exactly what the AI Act requires. They're not just hitting a deadline, they're building competitive advantage.
That's a perfect way to frame it. For listeners who want to dive deeper into specific frameworks, audit trail architectures, and implementation roadmaps, head over to etherlink.ai to find the full article. You'll find detailed guidance on everything from risk classification to agent deployment strategies. Sam, thanks for walking us through this today.
Thanks for having me, Alex. This is genuinely important work, and it's great to see organizations taking it seriously. The organizations that get ahead of this will have enormous competitive advantage in 2027 and beyond.
That's all for this episode of EtherLink AI Insights. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with more on AI governance, enterprise architecture, and the future of autonomous systems. Until then, keep thinking about trust.